everybody. It's Baron with OneChiropractic, again with Dr. Richard Barwell. Continuing this conversation, man. I think we're like 8 or 9 sessions in. I actually can't even count at this point. I'm just enjoying the conversation. So, yeah, today, we spent the whole last episode really just talking about dyskinesis and going through the different elements of dyskinesis. And, today you're going to talk a little bit more about how stress actually affects and creates the subluxation. We went high level in completing that circle, prefrontal cortex, cerebellum, into creating the actual subluxation. But you're going to get a little bit deeper in how stress actually affects the brain today. So why don't we just jump right into it?
Okie dokie. This is a time for us to change within the profession. And I see this as a potential to get all of the organizations in chiropractic to come together, because they all agree with this stuff. They just got their own little drums that they've been beating. And we need to say, hey, you're in a band, dude. Get in the band and let's all play together. And this is the foundation that we can use to bring us all back together again. There's evidence here that supports the evidence-based group. There's great scientific research in here. There's great philosophy in here. There's the art people can come back into play in this thing, understanding how they're affecting the nervous system. So I hope this reaches out to all the different factions within the profession to say, we need to stop being separate. We need to be together on this thing. And neurologically based chiropractic can do that. It can bring it in. So let's just talk about where we need to go with this. So taking it from pain to brain. So what I want to talk about from here is the function of the nervous system. This is the simple form. This is how easy it is to explain this. So we have sensory input. We have sensory systems in the body. This body has all sorts of different sensors, neurological sensors, to tell the brain what's going on out there. And it covers a wide range, from proprioceptive to temperature to movement, you name it. We've got them out there, muscle spindles. It's incredible, the stuff that we've got to feed information into the computer at the top of the nervous system to say, I got to have information if I'm going to function right. So the sensory input gathers information to monitor changes or stimuli occurring outside and inside the body. So we just think that it's all about stuff that's out there. No. It's also stuff that's going on with digestion and heart rate. You name it. It's all down to the cellular level, down to the organ level, down to the system level. And that's all being fed back in to this central computer up top here. It's unbelievable the amount of information that comes in there. We even have a system that's a gateway called the reticular activating system that shuts down when there's too much stuff coming in. And if that's not working right, we're going to burn out. You're going to have a problem. And if it doesn't open enough, you're not going to have enough information. So we need to be taking a look at all of this stuff that's coming in. Because what happens then, it all goes up into the brain, and the brain has an incredible system that comes in, and it doesn't just sort of go linearly. It doesn't go do. It explodes to there. It has a priority system, but it happens in such a nanosecond that it just literally explodes into the brain for the brain to be able to respond quickly enough. You got to remember that really our conscious awareness is only there to fulfill a need of the subconscious mind for us to be aware of the situation. To say, it's too hot here, you need to move away. Oh, okay. Right. The reason it's too hot here is that subconscious saying, hey, dude, what are you doing out there? Move your butt. So it all gets integrated into that brain, and it works on it, processes and interprets sensory information, and it decides on what action is needed. And then it sends a message out to the motor system, then responds to the integrated stimuli and activates muscles, glands, and systems that in turn feed back into the sensory system. That's it. That's how it all works. It's that simple. You can use this chart to explain it to patients. So the next thing we need to look at is what happens when things go wrong. So it gathers information, but there's something wrong with the integration in there because the processing resources have become overloaded. That you've already started to build up patterns that aren't ideal patterns. That you saw that dog and you believed it's a bad dog, so now you've got a pattern built in there that says every dog is like that, and that's your reaction that you get. Only now it's greater than that. And it's also going on down at that subconscious level.
Which you can
the integration isn't working.
What you can add in here that people need to understand, and I tell this to doctors all the time as well, why it's so important to explain to your patients why when you take medications, it hinders our ability for the adjustment to do what it's supposed to be doing. For that exact reason, because when you get that chemical interference, that integration process starts changing and the body starts responding to wrong input, and it's coming from the chemistry. So therefore the adjustments aren't going to be as effective because it's not gathering all of that sensory input the appropriate way, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, when you start taking drugs, you'll take the drug for one particular sign or symptom that they've given it to, but we know that there's like side effects. Only they're not side effects, they're direct effects. They're just not ideal. Right. Well, what's that doing to the integration up there? Yep. How's the system dealing with all of that? Yep. It's going like, I got another problem here, so it creates another symptom to let you know that it's in trouble. So now with the integration, we've got a problem here because it's not putting out good information. So the information to the motor output isn't ideal, which now feeds back into the system. And this is what happens.
Yeah, it changes everything now. Yep.
It now the whole system is out of whack.
Yep. And
when that reaches the point of no longer being able to maintain survival, you die.
Yep.
It's that simple.
And what people need to understand with today's society and how fast-paced, you know, you said it, but I really want to pause and make sure people understand this. This is survival mode, right? Once that goes red, the brain knows one thing: stay alive. And stay alive, and me stay alive, meaning my brain stay alive, which means it's going to sacrifice part of its limbs or the rest of its system to keep the brain alive. And this is where we get into that chronic stress, and you have things like adrenal fatigue and all, because you're just cycling bad information over and over and over because of that integration in the sensory input. And that's the beauty. And I know you're going to get to it, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but I get so excited. That's what the adjustment does, is it interrupts this cycle better than anything else on the planet. Which is why I love it.
I need 5,000 of you out there saying the message. I need 30,000. I need 60,000 chiropractors.
Yeah.
Saying this message.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You know, we need to change the world. It's here. We were right all along. We just had the wrong application.
That's right. That's right. Great stuff, man. Love it.
So, simplified model of subluxation. What is subluxation? It's very simple. Oops. Where did that go?
We gotta love technology.
Somewhere else, and I gotta go back to sharing. Right there. Share. Here it comes. Simplified model. Compromised neural integrity is the subluxation.
Yep.
Now we use that in the definition of subluxation as compromised neural integrity, but we just kept it at segmental level rather than at the high level of processing. Right. So what does it do? It reduces our ability of neuroplasticity, and that's the ability to build new wiring, to be able to adapt continually. We lose that ability, and so we can't respond ideally. Do you think that's life-threatening? Absolutely. That's the whole game. So it's created by emotional, chemical, structure, and other stressors, such as electromagnetic. I really don't like people putting phones next to their brain. The output of electromagnetic fields from a phone, and now we're talking 5G, we don't have any clue. How far are we going to go? We know this. If you just stand in front of one of the microwave reflectors, the towers that they use, like for instance, the Army or Navy uses, you know, the big reflectors. If you step in front of it, you're going to die. It will literally fry you, and you will die. So electromagnetic fields are something that are very real and very powerful. We need to understand that. Yep. So they overload the processing resources of the central nervous system. Okay? So how does stress change the brain? You're going to get tired of me talking about this, but it's important. We're going to keep going down into the details of this. The brain does not self-regulate. It's the one area, you know, we talk about we're self-healing and self-maintaining, except for one part, the brain. It can't self-regulate. It gets stuck into a pattern and it can't get itself out. Something else has to help it to get out, to break the pattern. So the effects of stress reach out to every system of organ and cell in the body. Stressors create inhibitory or excitatory responses throughout neurological control. We're back to what we talked about before. these patterns over time become ingrained into long-term memory patterns that can stay for a lifetime unless you do something to interfere with that and interrupt that pattern and allow the brain to reset to more appropriate patterns.
So I'm going to pause you because I know you said it, but we've got to stop here because this to me is the linchpin that people need to understand why the adjustment is primary, right? Because you got to get that. You said it, but you know, the body is self-healing, self-regulating. We've been saying that from the beginning, and most people will accept that. But you got to get that it's self-healing, self-regulating by control, right? That's that cycle, that process of sensory input, integration, and then motor output, right? That's the self-healing, self-regulating if that sensory input is getting the right information, right? Yep. And so when we understand that the brain only functions from a series of sensory inputs, and then it memorizes that, and that becomes the truths. And we can do this through psychology, we can do this through anatomy, physiology. It's the same thing. When your brain starts hitting an element of this is truth for me, we're going to live in this truth until something tells me otherwise. And when you live, our body is a series of habits, right? Our lifestyle is a series of habits. So those that are addicted to caffeine, you get up every morning and you're drinking 2 cups of coffee. When that cycle continues for a long period of time, but that coffee doesn't come in, that truth that it's been told says, where's my coffee? And if I'm not getting my coffee, I got to respond differently, right? So then you get the headaches and you get all those other things because it doesn't have that truth that it's been told. People don't get adjusted because there's a bone on nerve. People don't get adjusted because they have neck pain. They don't get adjusted because their spine is a certain percentage out of alignment, right? Those are all factors and measurements and tools that we use to be able to deliver the adjustment, not taking that away. But that's not why they get adjusted. They get adjusted because we want to make sure there's great sensory input, period. And, yep. and that's what you're talking about here. Stress affects that cycle of information, which creates all the physical abnormalities that we measure in our profession. But we've got to get to the core root of why we're adjusting, and that's to make sure that there's proper sensory information. And I just wanted to pause and repeat that and say it a little different way, because you got to get this.
Remember in that dyskinesis, and I put up that subluxation, it distorts your perception of the world around you and interferes with your ability to adapt to it. So just let's play with this. What would happen if we had somebody who had ideal food chemistry, okay, they had ideal rest, they had a nervous system that continued to undo damaging stress-type patterns at the central nervous system level on an ongoing basis? How long are we going to live?
Yeah.
Who knows? We know that stress kills us.
Yeah.
Actually, the stress doesn't kill us. It's our lack of recovery from the stress that kills us. Right. That the system starts to break down and it can no longer respond the way it should. What happens if we continue to improve that? You know, and I practiced for long enough to know that people that stayed under regular chiropractic care were not as sick and were tended to be much more able to continue with their life and doing their things. I lost dear friends that I grew up with who just saw me as a chiropractor but never bothered to come, and they're not with me anymore.
Yeah,
they're gone. And I'm sorry about that. I tried.
Yeah.
So I think there's one more on here. I'm not sure. No, I thought there was one more on that one. Do you want to stop here?
I'm going to stop you on this one because I want to make one other point, but then we're going to come back and finish out this topic on another session, just because I want people to marinate on this for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I also want to just kind of touch in a little bit to round out this session. This is why when we're starting to understand this, and you have work of, Dr. Barwell, you kind of, really started this conversation. But there's a lot of people in our profession in little pockets that have gotten this, that have been students of yours or have found their own way through this process. And they're starting to really practice around this central theme. And we're starting to see results that, we've always seen miracles in chiropractic that we call miracles, things that, the medical community said couldn't help. And then they start getting adjusted and miraculously, right? That's where the one cause, one cure came from, was all of a sudden these people are just getting better. And we weren't even working on that, but they just got better after they started getting adjusted. So, but man, when you start understanding this sensory input and that cycle, right? Now we understand, and I know you're going to get to this, and please don't throw things through the computer at me for getting ahead of you. but I want to whet people's appetite. This is why we're having the effects we're having on things like autism and MS. Because what happens when you start properly stimulating and getting proper input into that body, into that brain, and it actually starts recognizing itself as having areas that need to be worked on. But because it's constantly getting that proper input and that information, we're starting to find that we can correct some of those behavior patterns and those conditions. And that's where it gets exciting.
Yeah, and we got to understand that and this falls down to the bottom of intent. It isn't the intent of chiropractic to treat diseases or illnesses. Correct. You know, you don't need a diagnosis outside of the fact of, is your nervous system functioning ideally or not? If it's not, you need chiropractic care.
Right.
And our job is to improve neurological function, bottom line.
Yep. Yeah, it's exciting stuff, man. So, man, you better rewind. Those of you watching this, you better rewind and watch this one again. This one, there's a lot of meat in here, and it's meat that you can use, and use this terminology when you communicate with your patients, when you communicate with your staff, when you communicate with the general public. There's a lot of meat in this one, which is why I wanted to stop, Doc, and then we'll pick back up on our next session. But we're getting into just what you've got to own. You've got to own this. And I don't say this very often. I'm not even a chiropractor, and this stuff turns me on something fierce. You've got to find that ignition. You've got to find that, where it ignites you, where you start getting excited about being a chiropractor again. That's really my secret motive in this. Is I want a whole revival happening in chiropractic, where we have docs that are so excited to show up to their office every morning and just light up that prefrontal cortex. And light that sucker up every day, and tell your patients when they come in, it's the best part of their day is getting adjusted, because we're going to let the rest of their day actually process properly, because we're getting them started with what's happening in our office. So, man, I want to love it for you, but I can't. I need you to love it yourself. And so please watch this again, send it to your colleagues, dive into this, because I promise you there's no software to buy. There's no gimmick thing for you to own this consciousness. And then owning this consciousness is what's going to drive you to want to start doing things differently in your practice. And that's where you can find all the gadgets and gizmos that help you to do this, like the bilateral weight scales. We're going to get into HRVs down the road, or the NeuroInfiniti, and actually measuring the brain pattern. There's all kinds of tools that are available to help you do this, but none of that matters if you don't get fired up for just owning this concept. So we love you. We appreciate you. We're going to pick right up where we left off on our next session, but keep viewing this stuff, keep sending it to your colleagues, and communicate with us if you have questions or comments. We love and appreciate you. God bless.